Margaret Brennan is at the White House tonight, and she joins us now. Margaret, what can you tell us about what the president said aboard Air Force One today?
Well, he said as soon as Monday, possibly even Tuesday, you could see an executive order from him, or at least some rewording of the one already issued on immigration, which is our understanding of where the White House is right now. But there's been a lot of discussion here, I have to tell you, in the past few hours about exactly what the White House wants to publicly message about this. The president got out and said, you know, he is looking at executive action here, some measures to increase security, as he said. What we understand that to mean is that if, as Jan explained, if you tweak the language of the executive order, you could, in many ways, bypass some of the concerns about it. So, as the White House has said, there hasn't been a final ruling on the merits and the constitutionality of the order itself. Perhaps they could bypass having to go to the Supreme Court by fixing some of those concerns, while they continue to argue in lower courts about the stay that is in place, the restraining order, essentially, the travel restrictions that continue to be in place while the overall ban is still being negotiated in the courts. So it's a workaround, essentially, is the easy way to say it.
Well, Margaret, I want to ask you about the meeting between the president and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe today, or Friday afternoon, at the White House. They discussed a number of issues, including North Korea and what aid, if any, the U.S. will provide to Japan and South Korea on that front. What are you hearing?
Well, we didn't hear a lot of detail from the president in terms of what his plan is. As he said, he takes the threat from North Korea very, very seriously, particularly when it comes to their increased nuclear ability. I can only imagine that following that press conference, some of those issues were discussed more broadly and in more depth. What we know is that there is a lot of concern in the region. Remember, there are U.S. forces on that border between North and South Korea that help to essentially keep the peace in what has been a decades-long conflict that technically never ended between the two Koreas. And we also have tremendous amount of forces in Japan itself, and have since World War II. So the U.S. military presence is strong. Donald Trump, as president, has now promised to maintain that. Remember, as candidate, he said things that suggested that would be re-examined. He complained about Japan not pulling its weight and helping to share of the burden of that military defense. Today, it was a very clear message, very warm one, meant to dispel those concerns. And Shinzo Abe, the Japanese prime minister, really reiterated all the key diplomatic terms that those listeners back in Asia want to hear when it comes to U.S. defense of maritime security and allowing some of the issues that have popped up with China to not complicate the region further.
And that's a question that I had for you, Margaret. With regards to China, the president had a phone call with the premier of China. Give us a sense of what was discussed, because some of the things that we heard candidate Trump saying on the campaign trail about the one China policy, and about perhaps using the one China policy as a negotiating tactic for other things, for perhaps trade. Apparently the call went very differently at the request of the Chinese government.
Well, the phone call happened late last night. That's when we found out about it. And what we know is that in the weeks leading up to this, there was some very careful diplomacy being laid out, deliberate diplomacy, something that the Trump administration has been criticized for not undertaking with other world leaders. So I think the White House appreciates this is a relationship that's so significant they need to get it right, particularly in the wake of that strong reaction from China when the then President-elect, spoke with the leader of Taiwan and said he was going to throw into question whether or not the U.S. would maintain the one China policy. As you said, the president said last night, we will stand by that, meaning, you know, the whole reopening of China that Henry Kissinger helped negotiate, that plan stays in place. We're not going to change our relationship on that front. But what still has not been fully developed here is, beyond this first phone call, getting that hurdle out of the way, what is next? Because the one thing that, well, two things Donald Trump was very clear about as a candidate. One was the wall with Mexico. The second was that he was going to be confrontational with China. What does it actually mean going forward? When does Xi Jinping sit down with Donald Trump as president and talk about some of these issues? What we've seen is that as China has encountered more economic bumps in the road at home, they've become more nationalistic in rhetoric in particular, and you've seen some more territorial encroachment in the East and South China Seas that some of our allies are very concerned could be leading the path towards military confrontation, which would draw us into any kind of confrontation as well.
Got it. All right, Margaret Brennan, thank you.